great to talk with. So I'm leaving to go to a game as we have to work for livings. And I knew this was a big story when it happened. I didn't think it was trending #1 on Twitter big until I opened the Twitter app and started getting flooded with messages about it. And we have to talk about this. The #1 rule on Close Call Sports is no politics on the website. We don't do politics. That's been our policy since day one. No politics. And I'm going to do my darn best to talk about this without talking about politics. But we do have to talk about Rob Drake's tweet, alleged tweet, which was political, but there are elements of it that aren't exactly political, and I'm going to try my best to talk about the non-political parts of the tweet. So, Rob Drake, if you haven't heard yet, put out a tweet where he allegedly said that if certain political events were to transpire, he'd buy a gun and there might be a civil war. And that's significant because the media picked it up and ran with it, and now MLB is purportedly investigating Drake for this incident. And whatever your political view is, I'm going to speak right now for any sports official at any level, whether you're an umpire in Major League Baseball or a Little League scorekeeping volunteer, because I know how contentious that can get. Maybe. Assume that all of your social media activity is public, because it kind of is. If you're on Twitter and you don't have the little lock that says you have a protected account, your social media activity is public, and anyone in the world can find it at any time. And you might think that, yeah, I only have a few followers and they're all my close friends, but you don't understand social media then, because I'm making an educated guess here. I don't know for sure, but I do know how the media works. And I do know that most likely someone in the media was following Rob Drake on Twitter, maybe not overtly, maybe it was a covert account following him, or maybe they just kept an eye on his activity without actually following him. And they were just waiting for something like this to happen because they were going to say, aha, gotcha. Because when you're a sports official, a public figure, that's what happens. And regardless of what your politics are, I'll give you a great example that's not political at all. Remember in August when I talked about Phil Cuzzi in Chicago? And he went into a Chicago courtroom and there was a reporter there and he got asked the question, who complains the most in baseball? And he said, he chuckled a little bit, patted the guy on the shoulder and walked out of the room. And that's the idea there is that was handled beautifully. He was in public. If he had said a name, you know how big of a story that is? Joe West was asked a similar question during an interview, and he said Adrian Beltre, and he laughed, and Beltre found out, and Beltre laughed because it was a big joke, and everyone was having a good time about it, but MLB said, you know what? No, we're suspending you. You're going to get suspended 3 games because that's not a joke. You are an umpire. You're supposed to be impartial. So that's an example of a non-political example of you're a public person. If you're an MLB or any other level, there's actually a league out there, it's not baseball, that says if you officiate in our league, you are not allowed to have social media. Now, that's a bit extreme, but it gets the job done. And you might say freedom of speech, freedom of speech. And let me speak to freedom of speech for a second. Freedom of speech protects you from the government doing something like arresting you just for voicing your views, politics or otherwise. Now, there's a limit to freedom of speech because the public opinion, court of public opinion, is obviously not bound by it. And if you make a terroristic criminal threat, that's not protected speech. And there is a political component to it where your employer in general, depending on jurisdiction, can't come after you for simply having a political opinion, can't retaliate for your political view. But if you mention something about buying an AR-15 and having a civil war, that might go beyond that. And if a reasonable person would interpret that as an allusion or a direct invocation of violence or something like that, that merits further investigation. And then, sorry guys, that's not protected speech. So no matter where you are politically on this is a bad move because it goes beyond politics. Now, if you knew Rob Drake's Twitter account, he'd been tweeting for a long time. And again, I'm going to say, you think that the people do not know about your Twitter account? I guarantee if you are an MLB umpire and you have a Twitter account, and there are several of you out there who do, people know about it, the media knows about it. And if something like this is going to happen, they're going to take your tweet and use it. So, again, I do not want to talk about politics because that's not what we do. But I am going to talk about social media. In social media, everything that you do is public. It's not having a conversation with a few close friends. It's public stuff. So, in conclusion, this is a big story because not only is it a controversial political topic, which is fine because that's what happens, and everyone's entitled to a political opinion, but it goes beyond the pale of that. And it goes to a dangerous place because he talks about acquiring a weapon, and he talks about, allegedly, of course, this is all allegedly, talks about a civil war. And that's pretty heavy stuff. So if you have an account out there, especially I'm talking to the umpires and to the referees and all of those, just be careful what you put out on social media because you never know when it's going to come back on you. And if it's a controversial thing, think twice. Maybe you don't want to talk about it. Again, we love having you with us. Like us on Facebook and Twitter at Umpire Ejections. Follow us, Close Call Sports. Subscribe to this channel. But just think for a second, when it comes to the controversial stuff, the ejections, if you're an umpire or the spouse of an umpire, you might not want to tweet about an ejection that has happened because someone might find it and something bad might happen as a result. We have examples of this, and as we're learning the social media landscape, it just tells us the golden rule that silence cannot be misquoted. That's, at the end of the day, what's really the lesson here is feel free to have your accounts, share your pictures and your funny stories or whatever. But when it comes to the controversial stuff, leave it at home. Leave it for in-person gatherings with friends, because as soon as you put it online, you can't take it back. And you can claim that it got there through an undue mean or you didn't mean it or what have you, but there's really no way to express emotion in a text tweet. And people are going to interpret it however they want to interpret it, and there is really no amount of damage control that can save you. So, especially if you're on the highest level of your profession in your sport, be careful. And again, you can agree, you can disagree with the politics of it. It really doesn't matter because everyone's entitled to their opinion. But you cannot go beyond that and start talking about extremely beyond politics controversial stuff, because that is just beyond the pale. That can get you in trouble with a whole bunch of things. Your job, assume that every player, coach, manager, commissioner, boss, crewmate, supervisor, everything, assume that everyone is going to see everything that you say, because chances are, in the end, that very well might happen. That's what we have to say about that. This is a developing story. MLB is looking into it. This has unfortunately distracted from the World Series. This is a World Series game. If you missed it, search Twitter for Rob Drake and you'll be filled in very quickly on what has happened here. But we don't want to distract from the World Series anymore. So what we're going to do is, I wanted to address this because I know that people are talking about it, but I didn't want it to become a focal point until after the playoffs are done, because there is a World Series going on. So we will revisit the issue. We will pick it back up right after the postseason is over. Until then, enjoy the rest of the series, and thanks for watching here on Close Call Sports.